Okay, Sunday, August 24th, 2025, and I'm making a second video because it's like a second topic, totally independent of the other one. I want to talk about all these Russians moving to America. You know, I finished off the last video talking about like how the Russian economy has realigned or adapted to the sanctions, and they found workarounds and found alternatives, to their funding, and it's like India's not going along with Trump. Hang on, let me just get this microphone in the right place. So the Indians really, like I said, their Modi is like really determined to do what he wants. But what I want to talk about is like, I've been watching like some videos, like there's a lot of American families apparently moving to Russia now. Not a lot, but some. And they're very public about it on YouTube. You know, there's like this Huffman family. You know, the guy had 3 daughters, and he went and joined the Russian army. Now they're saying he got killed in Russia, but I'm seeing other stuff that it's not confirmed. You know, there was some blog post or something that he was like droned, but I'm seeing like there was a video from that family saying he's still around. And then there's this other guy, who's they're all from Texas. These people are, I don't know, some conservative places in America, Western U.S. or something. And they moved over to Russia on some visa, like their anti-woke or, like their values visa or something. And there's even this town. They're like this. They set up like for Americans, like outside Moscow, to accommodate all these immigrants, like to have like a U.S. colony there of like-minded people or so. And on paper, yeah, it sounds appealing. You go to a new country and they let you keep your conservative values and everything, but they need to read a little bit of the history. This is where it gets kind of dicey. Lenin or Stalin, I think, I read somewhere in the 1930s or 1940s, they wanted to build up Russian industry, really big time. Here I am walking on the tracks again, something you can't do in Western countries. But they recruited, they put out 6,000, that they needed 6,000 Americans with, with trade skills like machinists, tool and die makers, whatever, plumbers, electricians, to come to Russia and help them develop their industry. And they actually got 10,000 people to come over. But, and they were living in Russia, adapting, learning Russian. I mean, some of them obviously got in trouble because, the free speech thing is not a big thing over there, and the openness didn't work. But eventually, after 10 years, there was a big purge in Russia, and most of them were killed off. And so that you Americans who, are looking at Russia as like some kind of a conservative utopia, like, I would just tell you, go to Idaho or go to Utah or Wyoming. Wyoming is very conservative. I mean, I lived in western Kansas, when I was in college. I went to Kansas State. I would say it's central Kansas, but it's west of Kansas City. Pretty much everything in Kansas is around Kansas City, and then everything else is western Kansas. It's pretty conservative there, pretty white. I was in the minority. I think long back I was in Cheyenne. I've been to almost every U.S. state. I, drove through it or something, or flew through it, or spent a day in almost every U.S. state, throughout my life. I can't remember the details, but I can remember that, like these western U.S. states like Montana and stuff, they're quite white, and quite conservative, especially if you live outside the big cities. And you can probably have your life over there. I wouldn't advise going to Russia. Oh shit, the train is coming. I gotta get out of there. Yeah. Looks like we got a train coming. So now I'm in the woods. That's the dangers of on the train. So yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. Here you can hear the train. Yeah. So, yeah. Hopefully now I can get home. Yeah, that was cool. Got that on footage. You know, but yeah, so if you're looking for this kind of life, and that's, you know, conservatism, you know, Christian values, you know, no crime, you have a lot of places in America. And I mean, quite honestly, even here in Ukraine, you would be better off. You know, you can mostly speak your mind here. I mean, there's war here, and people are really touchy and sensitive and everything, but it's mostly pretty good, you know, and especially if you have like a family values and all of this. I mean, I do. I don't even drink or smoke or any of that stuff. You know, I'm in bed pretty early, and this place suits just fine. And you don't have to worry about a purge in 10 years, because this is like just how it is in Russia and dealing with Russians, right? You can see this with Trump and Putin negotiations, right? They talk real nice and they just start bombing everyone. So when you're no longer useful in Russia, or if they have some paranoid delusion, you're going to be a big target over there. They got you in one village, you know, you're all tagged and numbered, you know, documents. They got people who know where you are. You know, it's yeah, so I wouldn't buy into that. I would advise you to read some history, because I'm watching these videos and they're very ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, you know, I took my kids to a Russian school, and you know, everyone's dressed up nice and have ribbons in their hair and all this kind of thing, and no woke ideology. If you want to escape woke ideology, there's plenty of places in America to do it. You can come here to Ukraine. There's Poland, you know, outside of Warsaw. You know, I mean, all the big cities are going to have this, and I don't like it either. If you know me, I'm pretty anti-woke, but I sure as hell wouldn't move to Russia. You know, you would, yeah, because you're, you know, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with these people. Maybe they're being paid. They're paid actors. Maybe they're these Russian Americans or something that have really good American English, and they just need an acting job, out-of-work actors. But it's crazy that they're bringing their kids there. You know, that's really, like I said, they don't really understand what they're getting into. I mean, if they're just believing these ads, I guess that's the power of marketing. You can sell anything to anybody in America if you package it right. You know, it's really, I don't know. I talked to one of them a while back, this Mexican-American guy who was an Iraqi war vet. He was a Marine who actually had combat experience in Iraq. And I think he's in Mexico now. You know, he married a girl. He was living in Siberia somewhere. And I think he, in a town called Sudanka or something, I think he's out. They moved to Mexico or something. Because, you know, also just the mentality there. It's like here, you know, the Soviet Union mentality. It's even worse there than here. I mean, here, I mean, you find some progressive people who can think in an innovative and efficient way and customer-oriented way, but over there, it's really, you know, if you're an American and you get into that, because I've lived in Poland, I've lived in Estonia, I'm living here in Ukraine, I've done Eastern Europe. You know, I've been in many places. You know, when I was working for an investment company, looking at companies, I've been in Latvia, Lithuania. You know, there's a mentality. And if you're American, it's really hard to deal with it. You know, it's, you know, and it's not easy to adjust to. And if you start making a lot of noise, now you can do it in the European countries. In Ukraine, nobody's really going to get mad at you. I mean, you can get in a little bit of trouble here in Ukraine if you say a few things, which is pretty much lying, if you're lying. You know, like there was some American guy got in trouble because he denied that there was even a war, and he was saying it very publicly. And I mean, it's martial law, you got to understand that. But for a lot of people, I mean, and if you go in Russia, it's like, and you're critical of things, you know, you can get in a lot of trouble. You know, all these freedoms you have in America, and just have a bad day, good day, and you just say what you think. You really have to be measured. You know, and I think these Americans who moved over there, I bet you a lot of them are going to come back. I bet you a lot of them are going to, you know, figure it out that you just had to move to Wyoming. You just had to move to Idaho, or even I think in Arkansas they're creating an all-white community, you know, or something like that, you know. So, you know, in America it's like there's something for everybody. You just have to go find it. You don't have to leave the whole country. Now, I mean, granted, I did. I went to Norway, but it's more of an adventure thing for me than the ideology. And when my daughter is old enough, we're going to head back to the U.S., you know, because the private schools there are really good. You know, it's something I can afford now. You know, it's like to put her in a school where they wear uniforms and don't use cell phones, don't use iPads. You know, it's, you know, and they're learning Latin language, which is really good for the SAT exam. Helps you look at a word and understand what the word means. You know, so, you know, hardcore mathematics. You know, it's just, U.S. is 50 states, 50 countries. And every one of them, I mean, they're more alike than different, but there are differences. And even within those states, they're pretty big. Every town has a personality. And, you know, if you don't want to come out to Ukraine and you're looking for an anti-woke place, there's plenty of good places in the U.S. I mean, even like Delaware, where I'm thinking to move. Like, Delaware is actually like three states. There's like the top part of Delaware close to Philadelphia, there's middle Delaware, and then there's lower Delaware. And they're all very different. And it's like one of the smallest states in the U.S., but there are three very distinct cultures there. So, yeah, you can find all this at home if that's your reason for moving. Like I said, if you're moving to Russia with your kids, you're crazy. You know, you need to read the history of what happened to the last batch of Americans that came over. It didn't end well. You know, it really didn't end well for them. And people keep forgetting that. And I mean, I remember there was one American, too, who lived in Russia in the 40s or something. And he set a skydiving record. And when they were going to go do the documents, you know, he said, "I'm American." And they said, "No, you need to write down that you're Russian." Because the Russians obviously wanted credit for this skydiving record. And he kept insisting he was American. And he found himself in Siberia for 10 years. There was a movie on this long back. I can't remember. I remember watching it with my dad when I was a kid. But it really put something in me that, you know, Russia's not a place to move to. I don't even want to visit there, you know, ever, you know, ever, never. So, I mean, because like I said, they bait you with, you know, they tell you what you want to hear. And it's like what they're doing to Trump, tell him what he wants to hear. And then they switch. It's a bait and switch. They're bait and switch country, bait and switch culture. And if you're one of these Americans who are living in Russia, get the hell out. Get your family, you know, just tell the authorities you're going to visit the grandparents back in America or whatever and never come back. You know, just get the hell out of there. Because you don't understand at all what you're dealing with. They're not your friends. They're getting some utility from you. Once they've got your skills or whatever it is that you're bringing over and they got it from you, and then they can figure out how to do it themselves, you'll get purged. And, you know, it's really sad you're putting your kids through that. So anyway, that's all I got. See you later. Bye.